Claire stood at the door, fixing her curly hair in the mirror one last time. After 8 years of staying home with the kids, she was finally going back to work. Her heart beat fast with a mix of joy and nerves. "You'll do great," her husband, John, said with a smile, handing her a cup of coffee. "I hope the kids won't miss me too much," she said, kissing their sleepy faces before grabbing her bag. To help out at home, John had hired a maid. "She comes today," he reminded Claire. "Don't worry, I checked her references. Everything looks good." Claire nodded and waved goodbye. A few hours later, the doorbell rang. John opened the door, expecting to see a stranger. But what he saw made his mouth fall open. Standing there was a woman with the same curly hair, the same green eyes, the same warm smile, and even the same tiny scar above the eyebrow. For a moment, he thought Claire had come back early. But the woman wore a maid's uniform and held a small suitcase. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm Joan, the new maid." John blinked. You look just like my wife." Joan laughed nervously. "I've heard I have a familiar face sometimes." "No, it's more than that," John said. "Come in." She stepped inside, looking around shyly. The children ran into the room and stopped in their tracks. "Mommy?" little Lucy asked. "I'm not your mommy," Joan said kindly. "But I can see why you think so." John couldn't stop staring. "Do you know Claire?" "No," Joan said, confused. "Should I?" "She looks exactly like you," John said. "Same face. Same voice. Even that scar." He pointed. Joan's fingers touched her forehead. "I've had it since I was 2, she said. "I fell off a swing. That's how Claire got hers, too." They sat down and John asked questions. Joan answered them all honestly. She had grown up in another town. She lived alone. Her ID and papers were real. Everything checked out. But still, something didn't make sense. Then Claire came home. She walked in cheerful until she saw Joan. Her purse dropped from her hand. Her face turned pale. Joan stood up slowly. "You." Claire stared at her. "How is this possible?" Both women moved closer, studying each other. Their eyes were wide with shock. They spoke at the same time. "I've never seen you before." They sat down. The kids whispered to each other, confused. Claire looked at Joan closely. "Do you have a birthmark on your shoulder?" she asked. "Yes," Joan said, pulling her shirt slightly to show the small star-shaped mark. Claire gasped. She had the exact same mark. "I don't understand," Joan said. "I came here for a job. I didn't know anything about this." Neither did Claire. The night was full of questions. Claire and Joan talked for hours, sharing stories. Every little detail made the mystery deeper. They both loved strawberry ice cream. Both were afraid of thunder. Both had the same laugh. But their memories were different. They had grown up in different places with different families. "How can this be?" Claire asked John later when they were alone in the kitchen. "I don't know," he said. "But you two aren't just lookalikes. This is something more." Claire couldn't sleep that night. She stared at the ceiling, her mind full of strange thoughts. Had she met Joan before? Was this a prank? A dream? Or something else, something bigger? The next morning, Claire called her Aunt Millie. She had raised Claire after her parents died in a car crash when Claire was 16. "Aunt Millie," Claire said, "I need to ask you something strange. Did I ever have a sister?" There was a long silence on the phone. "Why are you asking?" her aunt said quietly. "I met someone," Claire whispered. "She looks exactly like me. Same everything." Aunt Millie sighed. "Claire, there's something I never told you." Claire's heart skipped a beat. "When you were born, you had a twin," Millie said. "But your parents, they were struggling. No money. 2 babies was too much. So they made a hard choice. They gave one up for adoption." Claire's mouth went dry. "They gave her away?" "They were heartbroken," Millie said. "But they thought it was the only way you'd both survive." Claire sat down, shaking. "What was her name?" she asked. "Joan," her aunt said softly. Claire dropped the phone. She ran into the living room where Joan was helping Lucy put on her shoes. "Joan," Claire said breathlessly. "I know who you are." Joan looked up. "You're my sister." The room went silent. Joan slowly stood, her hands trembling. "What?" "You're my twin. We were separated when we were babies." Joan stared at her, eyes filling with tears. "I always felt like something was missing," she whispered. Claire hugged her tightly. "I found you." Joan began to cry. So did Claire. And so did little Lucy, even though she didn't understand everything. She just knew something big and important had happened. John watched from the hallway, a gentle smile on his face. He had only wanted to help his wife by hiring a maid. But instead, he had helped her find a missing piece of her heart. And that was just the beginning. Claire couldn't stop thinking about the past. Her mind was full of questions that didn't have answers. She sat on the couch holding a baby photo of herself. Or maybe it was Joan. How could she even tell anymore? Joan moved around the house gently, still helping out like a maid, though now it felt strange. Claire tried to treat her like a sister, but everything was so new. The kids liked Joan already. Auntie Joan made them pancakes and read them stories with the same warm voice as their mom. They didn't understand how wild this all was. But Claire did. I need to know everything, she told John one evening. I need to see where I came from. I need to go back. So the next day, Claire packed a small bag and drove to the town where she grew up. She hadn't been there in years. The streets looked the same, but the air felt heavier now. She walked slowly past her old school, the swings still creaking in the wind. Her feet led her to her aunt's house. Aunt Millie opened the door and gave Claire a hug. I figured you'd come. Why didn't anyone tell me? Claire asked. Millie sighed. It was a secret buried deep. Your parents didn't want you to grow up feeling like something was missing. They hoped the pain would fade. But it never did. Claire sat at the kitchen table. Millie brought out an old, dusty box and placed it in front of her. Your mom gave this to me. She said to only give it to you if something ever came up. Claire opened the box with shaking hands. Inside were baby clothes, a tiny bracelet with the letter J, and an envelope with shaky handwriting. She opened the letter and began to read. To our sweet daughters, Claire and Joan, we are sorry. So very sorry. We loved you both with all our hearts. But we had no money, no food, and no family to help us. A kind woman offered to take one of you and raise her as her own. We picked names for both of you. We hoped that one day maybe you would find each other again. Please forgive us. Mom and Dad. Tears fell onto the paper as Claire read the words again and again. She had a twin. She had always had a twin. She wiped her face and looked at her aunt. Do you know who adopted Joan? I only know the woman's name, Mrs. Weatherby. She lived in a little yellow house on Maple Street. Claire stood up. I need to go there. The yellow house was still there, though it looked old now, with vines growing along the fence. Claire knocked on the door. An elderly woman answered, her eyes sharp and curious. Can I help you? My name is Claire, she said. I think you once adopted a baby named Joan. Mrs. Weatherby stared at her for a moment. You look just like her. Claire nodded. That's because I'm her twin. The old woman opened the door wider. Come in. They sat on a soft couch with faded pillows. Mrs. Weatherby spoke gently. I found out your parents couldn't care for both babies. I had no children and I had always wanted a daughter. I promised to give her a good life. And I did. But Joan never stopped asking about where she came from. Claire nodded. She said she always felt like something was missing. She was right, the old woman whispered. She was missing you. Back at home, Joan was sitting with John and the kids playing a board game. But her eyes kept glancing toward the door, waiting. When it finally opened, she jumped up. Claire walked in with her face full of emotion. I went back. I found out everything. Joan listened quietly as Claire told her everything, the letter, the baby clothes, the yellow house, the woman who raised her. Joan cried softly as she heard her own story being spoken aloud. I always thought I was alone, Joan said. But I wasn't. Claire hugged her tightly. We were never alone. We were just apart. The days that followed were full of sharing. Claire and Joan talked every night, telling each other their favorite memories, silly stories, and even sad ones. They had missed each other's childhood, but maybe they could still share the future. One night, Joan looked out the window at the stars. What do I do now, Claire? I was just your maid. But now I'm your sister. You're not just anything, Claire said. You're family. Joan smiled. It feels like a dream. Claire reached for her hand. It's real. And I don't want you to go. Stay with us. Be part of this family. John nodded from the other room. We'd love to have you stay. The kids already adore you. Joan covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. You really mean it? Claire nodded. We were meant to find each other. It wasn't a mistake that you came here. Joan laughed through her tears. Then maybe it's time to stop running from my past. That weekend, Claire and Joan went shopping together. For the first time, they walked side by side, not just as mirror images, but as sisters. People stared at them in the store, whispering and smiling. But neither of them cared. They had found each other, and nothing could pull them apart now. And just when it seemed like the story couldn't take another twist, something unexpected arrived in the mail. A letter, thick, gold-edged, and official-looking. Claire opened it, curious. Her eyes widened. Joan, she said slowly, you need to see this. Joan took the letter, her hands trembling. As she read the words inside, her jaw dropped. She had inherited something big, and life was about to change all over again. Joan stared at the letter in her hands, blinking fast. "Is this real?" she whispered. Claire leaned over to read the words again. "It says your birth grandmother passed away. She left everything to you." "But I never met her," Joan said. John looked over Claire's shoulder. "Maybe she knew about you but didn't know where you were. Maybe she spent years searching." Joan's voice was barely a whisper. "She left me a house. And money. A lot of money." Claire squeezed her hand. "You're not alone anymore. You have a home. A real home and a family too." Joan smiled through tears. "I already found home. It's with you." But there was more. The letter had an address, a big countryside home with gardens and trees, not far from where their parents had grown up. Claire and Joan decided to visit it together. They drove through green hills and quiet roads until they reached a tall black gate. Beyond it stood a white house with a red roof and a wraparound porch. It looked like something out of a dream. Joan stepped out of the car slowly. "It's beautiful," she said. Inside, the house smelled like lavender and old books. The rooms were filled with soft chairs, big windows, and family pictures. Claire noticed a photo on the wall. It was their mother as a child standing next to an older woman. "That must be her," Claire whispered. "Your grandmother." They wandered through the rooms in silence, hearts full of wonder. In the attic, they found boxes filled with letters, toys, and old baby clothes, some marked Joan. "She kept them," Joan said softly. "She was waiting for me." Claire nodded. "She loved you. Even from far away." Joan didn't want to live in the house alone. So they turned it into a weekend home, a place where the whole family could laugh, play, and rest. The children loved the big backyard and called it the magic house. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Claire and Joan sat on the porch together, drinking tea and watching the kids play tag. "I used to dream about having a sister," Joan said. "I'd pretend she was out there somewhere, waiting to find me." Claire smiled. "I used to dream I had a secret twin, but I thought it was just my imagination." Joan chuckled. "Funny how dreams come true in the strangest ways." Claire looked out at the sky. "Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if we'd grown up together?" "All the time," Joan said. "But maybe we found each other at the perfect time. Not too early. Not too late." From that day on, everything changed. Joan no longer wore a maid's uniform. She became part of the family, helping with homework, baking cookies, and joining birthday parties. The kids loved her stories and called her their second mom. And John? He often said, "Hiring Joan was the strangest, best thing I've ever done." One day, Claire received a phone call from her school. A teacher had to leave suddenly, and they needed someone to step in and help with music class. Claire didn't know how to play piano very well, but Joan did. "She used to play all the time," Claire told the principal. "Can my sister come help?" That's how Joan started teaching music part-time at the school. The students loved her. She told stories through songs, helped shy kids find their voices, and made every class feel magical. Still, sometimes at night, the sisters would lie awake, thinking about the past, about the years they had missed, about the parents they had lost. "I don't blame them anymore," Joan said one night. "They did what they thought was best." "Me too," Claire replied. "And now we can choose to forgive, to move forward." They even held a small ceremony under the oak tree in the backyard, planting flowers and reading the letter their parents had written. It was quiet, gentle, and full of love. Joan kept the bracelet from the box. She wore it every day. Claire had one made to match. And sometimes when they stood next to each other in the mirror, they would laugh. "We're not just twins," Joan would say. "We're proof that love finds a way." One morning, a letter arrived for Claire. It was from a publishing house. They had heard about her story, the twin she found through fate, and wanted her to write a book for children about it. "I'm not a writer," Claire said, blushing. "Yes, you are," Joan said. "This story deserves to be told." So Claire began to write. She used simple words, big feelings, honest moments, and Joan helped her. When the book came out, it was called The Maid Who Looked Like Me. Kids everywhere read it. Teachers shared it in classrooms. It helped others talk about family, forgiveness, and finding where you belong. Years passed, but the story never faded. The sisters stayed close, sharing birthdays, holidays, and every little moment in between. The house on the hill became a place of joy, where laughter floated through the air like music. One day, Lucy asked Claire, "If Auntie Joan hadn't come, would we have found her?" Claire looked at her daughter and smiled. "Maybe not, But life has a funny way of bringing people back together. And with that, Claire looked out the window at Joan, who was playing with the kids, her laugh echoing through the yard. Two lives, once separated, now forever joined. And it all started with a knock at the door. Moral of the story: sometimes life takes people away from each other, but love always finds a way to bring them back together. Even the strangest, most unexpected moments, like meeting someone who looks just like you, can lead to truth, healing, and new beginnings. Family is not just about who you grow up with, but who you choose to love, forgive, and hold close when life surprises you. Thank you for joining Claire and Joan on their incredible journey. This story reminds us that no matter how far apart we may feel, the heart always remembers where it belongs. May you always believe in the power of love, the beauty of forgiveness, and the magic of finding where you truly belong.